class, which is always a big challenge. I called up this site. I wanted to show you that on my site, I did put some new links, so definitely refresh your screen. I did give the website link to Eric Johansson, and then there is that TED video. And then I did put the link for the color tool, the description of between raster and vector. And we didn't discuss this, but on the scanning tips, I perused the website quite extensively to find open educational resources. So that's sort of the labor intensiveness, is to find good quality, because there's a lot out there that's not. So I came upon this, and it is very good. It pretty much answers all your questions about scanning. So now here's what's important about your blog. It probably would be a good way to save your resources on a page called resources. So anything related to anything, like whether it be digital imaging or digital marketing or digital media, you can begin to create a page where you copy and paste the links. Like I used to write down things, I don't do that anymore. I basically copy and paste into my blog. And then I have that forever. So one of the basic things about scanning, and it's very straightforward, some of your laser printers, your printers that you have at home, can actually scan now. And the thing to remember, and this is just one fundamental important thing, is that when you scan, you're scanning at a resolution of 300 dpi. 300 dpi will give you the best quality at the exact size that it is. So if you have a postcard that's 5 by 7 and you scan it in at 300 dpi, it will be good resolution for you. But if you wanted it to be larger, like 12 by 17, or take a postage stamp, that you love a postage stamp and you want that postage stamp to be a poster, you would times 300. So obviously if you wanted to double the size, you'd go 2 times 300. That's basically it. That's the fundamental thing to really understand, that's very basic, is even if you're doing web pages, and we're going to get into graphic formats now, even if you were designing something for the web, which is only 72 dpi, you always still scan at 300. Why is that? Because most content on the web does sometimes go to print. So you don't want to scan it twice. And I'm not a big fan of scanning because it's labor intensive. But the important thing is just always, always, always be sure that you set the parameter in any program that you're in at 300 dpi. And then you're good to go. So this link is here for you to, there's some really good questions. I'll have a demo. I scanned in a postcard and it was very halftonish, very too much noise in a picture, and I'll show you how you can correct that. That's basically when you scan a magazine or you scan something that's printed, not a photograph, but something that is printed. So that will go through on another tutorial. So the other thing I wanted to be sure that you have also is on here is the public domain images. So I gave you the link here. And this is that page again regarding creative, all the images. So you have to understand that a website or the web itself, it is literally a very legal, liable platform that if you don't play by the rules, you can be charged. That's the downside, right? But the upside is if you publish anything on the website, you are actually copywriting. So it's actually very good to upload your content because it will, first of all, it'll make a note when you uploaded it. That's always within WordPress. And now you have it in a published environment as if it was a book, as if it was a movie. So the web is just as legally restraining as any other platform. So this site that I've given you here, and there is a video on my playlist that will show you how to walk through this. So one of the things that they had under search for images that I would like you to review is Creative Commons. So Creative Commons came about because, let me just get to, Creative Commons came about because of the web. And what it does is it lets you create certain levels of content. So some content can be, you don't want anybody to take it. It's copyrighted. You can't share it. You can't mash it up. You can't remix it. Some of them lets you share, but you give credit. You must give credit to the source. That's a lot of what people do today. We're all sort of self-promoting ourselves on here. So when you peruse through this, there's a really good video to watch right here. And the reason why this is important is because these are the licenses. It literally legalizes and copyrights your image, and then it protects it. And so it has a little bit of this, no, you can't touch it, or no, you can share it for educational purposes. If you make any money, then you have to share it, you know, all of those things involved. And so when you start creating content that's going to be seen on the web, you want to be ahead of the game so that people do not take advantage of your work, and they will see right away that you know what you're doing. And that's really important to reflect your understanding about copyright of your own material. Now, with that in mind, when you take something from Google, there is a very good site. I have it on my blog called TinEye. If you drag and drop an image into this portal site, it will tell you the source of that image. So that's very helpful if you make an image. Now we're under an educational umbrella, so there's a little bit of what we call fair use. And when you go through that site that I've given you, it's important to know that the fair use will, if your image became very successful and you wanted to sell it as a poster, you would really have to get the rights from the Google sources, which is why I recommend to really try to use as much as you can on public domain sites. So Wikipedia Commons, right? Mostly public domain. And it will tell you, like if I wanted to search for something, let's do Statue of Liberty. Did I spell statue right? Yeah. So it will give you very good file sizes too, very high resolution, and you can download it. So you can, in your composites for this assignment, this particular assignment that we're doing now, I'm definitely letting you use Google Images, but the next one will probably be using public domain. And so these other ones like Pixels and Pixabay, they are public domain, stunning royalty-free stock photos. Even Getty now, where is it here? Yeah, even Getty Images are letting you use some of these images as what they call placeholders. So the placeholders are letting everyone be able to utilize it for presentation purposes. And I think we're cut off. I'm sorry, we're losing ourselves in our Zoom, right? Luckily, we have these videos, so I do apologize if it came off, which I just got notice of right now. So, so in this context of Getty Images, there are a lot of public domain images. So let me go to, I wanted to show you this on here. This is MC Escher. This was actually, this is the artist that is the inspiration of Eric in Eric Johansson's pictures. I'm just looking at, and so this is his work. And, you know, he's the one where, you know, he really created a little bit of a sense of hyperrealism. And so I wanted to show you this because everyone is inspired by what each artist does. And this is one main artist that really was a big inspiration of the hyperrealism for Eric Johansson. So I just wanted to share that with you. I'll put that up on my site as well. So what I'd like to do now is to go to Photoshop. And I think if you unmute yourself, you can ask me questions as we go along. So right now, you should see Photoshop. And I have two images here. So I want to first show you how a lot of things, you know, you can do painting in Photoshop. So a lot of people are what we call digital illustrations, and they use Photoshop. They use Photoshop as if they were painting with traditional oils. So I'll cover those tools in regards to brushes and so forth as we go along each week, and have a special tutorial just for painting on a video. But I did want to show you that that is quite, you know, Photoshop is quite used in many other mediums, not just, you know, photo retouching, as they say. So right now I'm in Photoshop. The good news about Photoshop is when you do a new document, right up here gives you all the formats that you need. So I was very happy about that because I don't want to remember this stuff and I don't want to go look for my notes. I just want it at my fingertips. And Photoshop realized that. They realized that we do work in print, art and painting and illustration. We do work in web, mobile phones, responsive design, and film and video. And so the parameters that they set up for, so if you go to print, so for your first assignment, the hyperrealism, that's going to be print. And actually the collage is going to be print. The next two, the web design and the motion graphic, is web and video. We're starting out with print first because it's the hardest. It's the most time consuming because every little bit can be visible when printed. In the web, as I said, you can get away with a lot of mistakes. So in print, you want to make your hyperrealism be 11 by 19. Now you can make it 19 by 11. It depends on the composition. Is your composition vertical or is your composition horizontal? So that's up to you. So, and then it's inches. And then of course, by default, with print, automatically, as you see, it's 300 dpi. That is a big file. So I'm going to let you change it to 150. And the reason why I'm letting you change it to 150 is simply because it's hard to get good resolution images when you're not the photographer. So this way you won't be so compromised in your image quality if we keep it to 150. Now let's talk about these color systems. So basically, RGB and CMYK are two worlds that we live in. One is electric, that you plug in, and one is print, that you see, hard copy, as they say. So RGB is for web and video. You have to plug it in to see it. And it basically is based on light. It's the light of the screen. It's the light of the television. It's the light of streaming, right? Or your mobile phone. So that's what we call red, green, and blue, RGB. And if you ever studied theater, lighting design, if you have an actor on the stage and you throw red, green, and blue light all in one spot, it turns white. So why do they love that in lighting design? Because then the shadows fall off to blues and reds and greens. But where they mix, where the four colors mix, it becomes white, like a spotlight. So it's very nice. That's how it's working as physics. CMYK is the, let me bring that back. CMYK is the printing press. That is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. When you mix those colors together, you get the full range of a photograph. Sometimes when you print in CMYK, and you really, I don't know if you would do this in Photoshop, you wouldn't do it more in Illustrator, but say you were doing a package design and the budget was not a lot of money, you would do it in 3 colors. They would still be CMYK, but they'd only be 3 colors, and you'd only see 3 colors. I mean, you could see a little of a light color because it was blending with the white of the paper, right? But primarily 3 colors, and that job would be reduced in money-wise 50%. So 4-color printing jobs are very expensive. So that's why when you look at sometimes boxes of cereal, you'll see 3 colors. And that cuts down in the cost of printing. So for our purpose, because we're primarily screen, you can keep it to RGB. But I wanted to discuss that because that's critically important when you're working in visuals. And so that's the difference between the two. So if we were doing a body of work that was going to an offset printer, we would absolutely be in CMYK. You would not be in RGB. CMYK is where you would be. But for our purposes, because we're only looking at it by the screen, we will be RGB. So then when you come down to this window, you kind of have to open things up when you see these arrows. When you work in Photoshop, you always use transparency. The reason why those other colors are there are pretty much for the consumer. Because when they look at the transparent page, they'll freak out because it looks like a grid and they don't understand what they did. But we're talking about it because we're going to be able to know how to utilize Photoshop. And eventually everyone does learn it who tends to work. Everything else you can just leave alone when you start your project. And we'll start that next week after we talk about your concepts. And so RGB, 8-bit is fine to leave it at that. 19 by 11 is good to have. And right up here, you can call it hyper, dash, or underscore. And what I would like you to do, and this is a conversation about working in digital media, which is primarily most of my experience, is that you work with a lot of files. So you have to be very organized and very efficient in your file naming of the work that you're doing. So here's a good tip for working on any computer document. I don't care if it's a PowerPoint or a Microsoft Word document. Anytime you're working on a digital document, this tip that I'm going to tell you will last you a lifetime. So basically, you take a prefix of the subject matter. Our assignment is hyper. 01 is your first edit. Every time you work on that document, you do a save as, and I'll show you that in a second. You do a save as, and you save it to a higher number. Never trust a computer. You want to be sure that you're, and that's why sometimes when you save online, like I did this morning when I couldn't find something, I had to rely on the cloud to save it, or the interface, the online interface. But when you're home on your hard drive, higher number every time you edit. Now, why is that important? Two main reasons. One of your files could get corrupted, or it gets lost and you've got some backups. When you need space, you delete the lower numbers. Keep at least 3 to 5 higher numbers. Why is that important in the real world when you're working with clients and art directors and everyone else who you are being supervised by? People change their mind. They'll say, you know, I want you to delete this and delete that. A week later, they'll come back and go, you know, let's bring that back. Let's bring that back. If you did not save it to those higher versions, you would have lost those layers. So it lets you go back in time where maybe you didn't want to delete something. You could go back and drag and drop it back into the new document. So that's that higher number file naming protocol that if you keep. And also the other important thing about production is when you work on a project, make a folder for it and call it the topic. So you might have a folder called digital imaging. Within that digital imaging, you would have a folder called hyper. And in that hyper folder, all the assets, all the notes, all the resources that you're using is in that one folder. I know you don't like it as much as I don't like it when you can't find something. The only reason why you can't find something is because you're not organized. If you stay with that methodology of higher number, one folder for each project, it's easy to archive. You can drag and drop it to clouds and to external drives. So these are just really fundamental studio protocols, but is expected from you when you work in the digital environment. And I was very fortunate. My first experience with the digital world was with animation. So I had to stay organized. And that in the long run has always helped me. So even when I'm working in Excel, I'll make a folder for my Excel project and keep everything in there. So basically, so once you have gotten the parameters here set, you just have to hit create. And as you can see, that checkerboard that I have here, that's what we call transparency. Now I'm going to bring up my layers here. And here's my toolbar. So when you're working in Photoshop, you can only work, I have to watch my time here. If we get cut off, I want you just to try to launch your Photoshop if you've downloaded it, or keep looking for your hyperrealism pictures for the composite, okay? So I'm gonna just see our time slot here. Oh, we got time to 1 p.m. Okay, so what I wanna show you, there's my 10-minute, thank you very much. I wanted to show you a couple of things like this. So for instance, the image that I just created, if I go up here to image size, this tells me exactly what I have. 150, 1911. You don't want to change that, because if you change it, you're distorting the pictures. When you want to change, if you need to change the paper size, you go to Canvas. Canvas lets you change the paper size. So for instance, if I did a composition, now this is kind of an unreal situation because I'm doing it for myself. I only have to please myself. It's not required that the deliverable is 19 by 11. If I wanted more space on the right side, because I don't like the composition, I can come over here, click this, and say to the width, go 22 inches, and it will apply the 2 inches on this side, which is really nice. I'm going to keep it 19 by 11 now. So the point to be made is when you start bringing in your images for your composite, like this particular image here, what you want to do is, number one, notice that it's always locked. Just double click it. And it unlocks it. Then you come up here to image size. Now this is the image size. Now why is it 72? Because every camera, every digital camera that shoots a picture will be 72 DPI. And you kind of freak out because you bought this expensive camera and you're going, oh my God, why is it at 300 DPI? It's because of this that I'm going to show you right now. What they found in the algorithm of capturing a picture for digital cameras is that if they capture it at 72 DPI, they can put more images on your chip than if they shot it at 300 DPI. Because they know you're going to take it into a program like Photoshop and do what I'm going to show you. And that is this. And this is a tough thing. I wish it was by default, but it's not. In order to keep the resolution of this picture and not distort it, I must toggle off the resampling. When you toggle off the resampling, watch what happens to the inches of this image when I bring it down to 300. It comes down to 5 by 3 inches at 300 DPI. So now I know that when I bring it in, it's going to be really only 3 inches by 5 inches, because you have to match the resolution when you import images into one composite. So the good news is we're going to do 150. So when I do 150, look the size that it brings it back up. It's a little bigger. It's now 10 inches by 7 inches. And that's why we're working at 150 DPI and not 300 DPI. You'll have much greater usage of the files that you find on Google especially. And so I say, okay. Still have 5 minutes. So the important thing here is there are 2 ways to bring pictures into Photoshop. And the 2 ways is, one is advantageous and one is disadvantageous. It depends on what you need. So I'm going to show you this one way. So when you find your images for your hyperrealism concept, you're going to file open all of them, and you're going to go through the series of image size, just like I did, and convert all your images to 150. Then what you're going to do is you're going to import that image into the composite. And that's what I'm going to show you right now. So what you do is you come up here. So these tabs up here in Photoshop are literally the documents that you have opened up. So all these tabs are what you have opened up. So when you want to bring in an image into another, there's two ways to do this. And this is the way I recommend. You mouse down on the tab and you drag it down. Just enough so that you can see the image behind, which is your composite, and the image it is. Then you come over here to your Move tool. And again, when you roll over these icons, they'll tell you what it does. You take your Move tool and you mouse down on the image here, and then you drag it into this. And then you can just minimize this until you're done with it. So now that image is what it is at this size, and I dragged and dropped it. That is one way of getting your images on. So if I go to the next one, I go to image size. The toggle is off. Now look, see, it's 2 inches right now, right? And that's at 300. So I can bring it down to 150. I got it to go up a little, 450. And now that's 150, which is what I have. And I'm going to mouse down and I'm going to drag and drop it in. And then close it out. So now you see we begin to bring in all the pictures that we want to use for the hyperrealism. And you can turn them on and off depending on when you want to use it. So what we'll be doing in on Thursday is how to extract, like the sky, from this picture, or how to get rid of the white on this picture. So there are a couple of things that are really straightforward that we'll cover each time, but that is the value of learning the tools to be able to do exactly what you want to do, and you really can accomplish just about anything in Photoshop. So I wanted to show you also, when you do Save As right up here, Save As is, and you know, they have cloud documents if you want to save it to the cloud. I personally drag and drop it to the cloud. I don't save to the cloud. But when you do a Save As, right here is when you would come over here and now change this to 2. So now you have a backup of what you did, and now you have a new document called 2. I want to just mouse down on this to show you, and hopefully you can see some of these things. So these are formats that are what we call deliverables. So whenever you're working in Photoshop, a client may ask you for these deliverables. So for one deliverable right here called TIFF, that's a very high resolution. And sometimes when you do a press release and you want photographs to be of high resolution, someone may ask for a TIFF. Or they will ask for a JPEG. JPEG is universal. Any program can be imported. So JPEG is often on that. So we'll talk more about these formats, but I just wanted to show you how you can be able to begin to manipulate